How many ugly ducklings were there? Most fairy tales tell you there's none because some dipstick thought a cygnet was a duckling. I'm here to inform you that, as far as British locomotion is concerned, there were 40 ugly ducklings, and you'd have to be a royal dipstick to confuse them for anything other than a locomotive. Introducing the Southern Railway Q1 class, better known as Ugly Ducklings, Coffee Pots, Charlies, Biscuit Tins, Clockworks, and most insultingly, Frankensteins. During the Second World War, Southern Railway was one of the most important railways working in England, as it covered the south coasts where German bombers and other Axis forces would frequently attempt to assault, essentially making it the frontline railway. This meant Southern needed to have engines ready to pull heavy goods, military supplies, and trains full of soldiers at a moment's notice. But they had an issue. Southern Railway was primarily a commuter railway that was electrifying most of their lines, so they were never too concerned with efficient freight engines. The current Q class of freight engines were heavy and old-fashioned, and while they could pull basic freight trains easily enough, they weren't ideal for quickly hauling troops and supply trains at a moment's notice. Southern's new chief designer, Oliver Bulleid, drew up some 060 engines, focusing on keeping them light, powerful, and to use the minimal amount of materials possible to build them. He ended up designing the Q1s, which were not only up for the job, but also very unusual in their appearance, earning many of the previous nicknames. They were also stripped of most unessential features to help save on resources. The wheels didn't have splashes to cover them, the casing was square to help with the boiler insulation and to make them easier to clean, and the frames at the front were so short that cleaners would have to lay a plank of wood on top of the buffers just so they had a decent footing when cleaning the smoke box. Despite their looks and lack of comfort, the Q1s were far from disappointing. Their light weight allowed them to run on 97% of Southern's rails. They were quick and were some of the most powerful 060 engines to ever run on British rails, meaning there wasn't a whole lot they couldn't do. They were even used until 1966, long after their intended lifespan as wartime necessities. After the formation of British Rail, they were given the power classification of 5F, which meant they were roughly as powerful as an LMS Black 5. Quite impressive for its size. It's also rumoured that after being built, Oliver Bulleid sat comfortably on the coal pile in one of the Q1's tenders during testing as it was travelling 60 miles an hour backwards. It's fair to say they were exactly what was needed for the war and far exceeded people's expectations. They weren't entirely flawless, as the engines were known to have poor braking on heavy goods trains, and their lack of comfort made them somewhat unpopular among footplate crews, but aside from that, the Q1s were exceptional machines that outperformed themselves long after their intended lifespan. There's one left in preservation, currently residing at the National Railway Museum. The lessons to take away from this? Looks aren't everything, and sometimes having less can make you do more. Subscribe for more.